Now, today is World Food Day, and the Organisation for Food Forward South Africa has launched an initiative called the Household Food Security Programme. The initiative is set to help reduce hunger in the country and ensure that nutritious food reaches homes of those in need. We're joined by the Managing Director of Food Forward SA, that's Andy du Plessis, to give us more insight on this initiative. Mr. du Plessis, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
I'm Fundo. Thank you very much for having us.
Lovely. Now, being World Food Day today, the pandemic has exposed, I would say, many a crises, but most disheartening is the food crisis. How big a crisis is it in South Africa?
The numbers are actually frightfully shocking and disheartening when you look at them. When you look at the NIDSCRAM quarterly scientific studies that are done, and as well as the Bureau for Economic and Agricultural Research, they both concur that for roughly 50% of our country's population, that's 30 million people, are either food insecure over protracted periods of time, in other words, for days and sometimes weeks on end. But for most people that are on social grants, especially, that's the only safety net, and they run out of money 2 weeks into the month. For the other 2 weeks, it's a daily struggle to be able to just survive. And that's a huge problem in a country that has a net surplus of food, which is paradoxical.
But then would you say we can actually attribute this to just the pandemic? Or really these are systemic issues, it's a perennial issue that government has failed to resolve?
Absolutely. So we have a huge inequality problem across South Africa. Prior to the pandemic, the Oxfam research showed that roughly 14 million people were food insecure, and a further 14 million people were at risk of food insecurity. What the pandemic has done is just exacerbated those numbers and really exposed to the core the problem we have in our country with people not able to secure food for themselves. I do believe that 27 years into democracy, we should have done better for our people. We're sitting with a statistic that 27.4% of our children up to the age of 5 years old are suffering from malnutrition and malnutrition-related diseases. And that stat has been going on for the last 5 years at least, and we were not successful in bringing that down from a Department of Health perspective. This is why Food Forward South Africa has launched the Household Food Security Program. We are working with the Department of Health and clinics across the country, in conjunction with community people that have logistics support vehicles, and we are getting food from assessed homes where children are suffering from malnutrition, that 27.4% stat. We also have a huge maternal malnutrition problem across South Africa where pregnant women are underweight and they're giving birth to children that are underweight. Those are the households that we are focusing on to make sure that we get food directly to their homes. So it's packed with nutrition. It's a nutritious parcel. So we're not only addressing a food insecurity problem here, we were trying to reverse a nutrition problem that we have across South Africa.
Certainly a commendable effort, I must say. But what are some of the challenges? Because resources are always so scarce.
Absolutely. As you know, funding is a huge problem. Government is not willing to support non-profit organizations that have been at the forefront of the food insecurity problem since the start of this pandemic 18 months ago. So we have to go it alone. But fortunately for organizations like Food Forward SA, we've not needed to go it alone. We've got huge amounts of support from the food sector as well as the financial sector. As you may be aware, our model of addressing food insecurity is predicated on the idea that there are huge amounts of food surpluses throughout the supply chain from farm to fork. So when farmers harvest, there are some surpluses there, and we intercept those surpluses by working with farmers and farmer associations like the Citrus Growers Association, like the Agri SA, Nedbank Agri, as well as Standard Bank's One Farm Share. And then, of course, throughout the manufacturing sector, we work with players like Tiger Brands and Food Lovers Market and retailers like Pick n Pay and others, where we are able to recover surpluses throughout the distribution cycle, good food within up-to-date food, not expired food, edible, quality food, where we're able to address this problem of hunger. So I think we need to point out that roughly 10 million tons of food across South Africa is lost or wasted. So we have it within our power to address this problem of food insecurity. We just need to do better to be able to connect that food supply chain partners with organizations, food redistribution organizations like Food Forward SA, and of course financial partners.
Now, how practical, beyond this of perhaps having others giving, but how practical is it to really prioritize subsistence farming? Because I know government always comes to studio and would talk about how they want to teach people to fend for themselves. So how sustainable would that be, to say we're looking to move away from the handouts, but possibly having them sustaining their own livelihoods or seeing to feeding themselves?
I think the key is a combination of factors. You know, inequality in this country is just gross. We're talking about human beings that are not living humane lives. And I think we need to follow a multi-sectoral approach to address this problem. Just simply saying to people that you must grow your own food is not sustainable. Where do they get the inputs to be able to turn that soil into arable soil and soil that can produce? Where do they get the inputs for the agricultural inputs and stuff like that? So what we need to do is create jobs. We need to turn this economy around. We need to reduce corruption and maladministration. We need better service delivery so that people are not becoming susceptible to these illnesses and diseases because they're living in squalor. We need to do better on the housing front. And of course, for all of this to work, the fundamental human right is access to food. And we need to do better because it's embedded in our constitution as a constitutional right, the right to food. So government needs to be an enabler. They need to work with organizations like Food Forward SA and others, other non-profit organizations in the sector that has been carrying the can, for the past 18 months. And we need to do better to make sure that we turn the tide on inequality and food insecurity, because malnutrition in a country like South Africa, where we have a surplus of food, is just not justifiable.
Mr. du Plessis, well, we still commend you nevertheless for your efforts. That was Managing Director for Food Forward South Africa, Andy du Plessis, talking to us.